If you've got Chipper on your show, what would it take for you to throw in a dip for the whole episode?
Uh,
When was the last time you threw a dip in?
College.
Would you throw up?
No, I've done too many self-deprecating things, but I wouldn't feel
actually
good.
could do it the whole time.
Welcome into the Ben Burnett Show. My name is Ben Burnett. My guest this week on the Appen Podcast Network is former Lieutenant Governor, State Senator, and current business extraordinaire, Casey Cagle. Casey, welcome in.
Ben, thanks so much. That's a great introduction, one that I'm normally not accustomed to this day and time. Business has been really good, and I'm enjoying this new chapter of life outside of politics, just getting off of Memorial Day weekend and recognizing that I didn't have to be in 5 parades all in one day, you know?
It was a hot one, too.
Yeah, exactly.
And to my right today is Hans Appen, the poobah of all podcast network things here at Appen Media. Hans, thank you for stepping in today.
So I get poobah and you get business extraordinaire.
Extraordinaire, yeah. Exactly.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
And poobah.
Yeah.
Well, Casey, I don't want to take too much of your time, but I'll get to it. It has been almost a year since you spent more or less every day of your life in the public eye. Talk to me about what got you interested in politics. Talk to me about those early days, what you were doing to just even get by.
Yeah, well, those are great memories, and I've had plenty of time to reflect on it. Actually, I ran for the state Senate back in 1994, and I ran as a Republican, and so that was back when
that was rare.
Everything was controlled by Democrats, and I remember going to my grandfather, and I called him Papa Bill, and I said, Papa Bill, I got some good news and bad news. And he said, what is it? And I said, well, I'm going to run for the state Senate. And he was so thrilled. He was excited. He was talking about, all the people I needed to, he needed to get me in touch with, and this was going to be great. And then he just stopped and he said, what's the bad news? And I said, well, the bad news, Papa Bill, is I'm running as a Republican. And he got the look on his face that I will never, ever forget, because it was like he had seen a ghost. And he stopped and he looked and he said, I've never voted for a Republican. From that point forward, we never talked about party politics anymore. Okay. He did let me put a yard sign up in his yard. So I'm pretty confident that he voted for me, but that was the era. And I was running against a very entrenched Democrat who was married to a surgeon, had done very, very well financially, and took on this journey mainly because I helped an individual 2 years previously to my run, and it was a campaign for a state house seat, a buddy that I went to high school with, and he said, I need you to manage my campaign. And I said, well, I have no idea what managing a campaign is about. So
you were how old at the time?
Yeah, I was elected at age 28. Right. So that would have been at 26. And he says, well, meet with me every morning to help me strategize. And we did. And every campaign, as you can imagine, gets dirty and nasty. And we ended up winning that race, but we won it by a very small margin. And I came home to my wife and I said, honey, I'm never going to get in politics. And she was like, good, thank goodness, because it was so dirty. It was just a nasty effort. So fast forward again back to 1994 when I ran. I had some people come to me and ask me to run, and I told them that story. I said, I'm never going to get in politics, but I never could get it off my mind. And I knew that my wife, great Southern Baptist, beautiful lady, would never, ever agree for me to run for public life. And I went home to her one day and I said, honey, I've got to share this with you. Can't get this off my mind. It's just been there, and I need you to speak into that issue. And she turned to me and she says, I think you need to do it. And I was floored at that point. I mean, completely floored.
My wife did not say that at all.
Because I never, ever thought that she would go along with it. And so as a result, I ended up running, had virtually no money. We sold barbecue plates. I had buddies that owned chicken plants, and they would give us the chicken, and so we would end up selling barbecue plates and selling enough chicken to be able to really finance the campaign. $25,000 we raised and ended up winning by 56% of the vote. And that's how I got into politics. And it's been a phenomenal ride. 24 years all told, 12 as a state senator, 12 as a lieutenant governor. And, I think it's true in life, and it's certainly true in elected office as well, is you always seek to add value. And if whatever you're given at the time, if you spend the effort to think of how you can improve it, how you can make life better for others, that's where, you find the greatest things in life. And that's what I enjoyed most about public service, is the ability to give back. And oftentimes it's not always measured in the laws that you pass. I'm reminded that every law that you put on the books takes someone's personal freedom away, right? And so you want to be very restrictive in that regard. But the greatest memories I have are really being able to help a family in need, whether it's with their child or whether, it's with another loved one, being able to assist them and to really impact their life. I'll never forget, I learned a real valuable lesson early on as a state senator. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and this was back when you had landlines, and some of the younger people listening may not recall, but we all had landlines in our home. And the phone rang. It was 10 o'clock. I answered, and it's a sweet little elderly lady, and she said, "Senator Cagle?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She says, "I've got a real problem. I need your help." And I says, "Well, ma'am, what is it? I'd be delighted to help you." And she says, "My neighbor has sprayed some kind of pesticide on the lawn, and it's made my cat sick." And for a split second, I'm thinking, it's 10 o'clock at night. I'm ready to go to bed. And this lady's called me about her neighbor and what they, sprayed and the cat. But she was frantic. I mean, she really was concerned. And then it hit me. I have been blessed to be chosen by the people of Hall County and Forsyth County to represent them, all right? And I need to put her interest first, because that's the most important thing on her mind at that time. And I've never forgotten that story, and it's kind of helped shape me to try to put other people's interests first instead of yourself. I think that came from, the way I was raised. My dad left me when I was 3 years old. My mom raised me by herself, and she worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. And she never took a dime of public assistance, but she instilled in me those values of hard work, perseverance, and a love for God. And what she really demonstrated was that life was not about self, but life was about service and service to others. And, I think when each of us take on whatever we are is designed for us to shepherd, when we have that servant leadership style about us, it always ends up good. So it's been great memories, a lot of fun, and I must say that there is life outside of politics, and it's not all bad.
I don't dispute that at all. On those early years in the state Senate, when you look back, similar to the lady whose cat's sick, I mean, I think everybody has a story along those lines that's ever done it. Yeah. What would you say, from a legislative perspective, was the most meaningful thing that you did that put your name out there to where you saw your, I won't say your star, your status, but where you saw your profile change outside of Forsyth and Hall County?
There's a number of things that I think that what people really want to see, and it's true today in politics, but it was even true back then, is really, what do you care about? What's going to define you as a legislator, the things that you want to really sink your teeth into and make a difference. And I think that I had really 2 opportunities looking back. One of those was representing Forsyth County during an interbasin transfer where they're trying to get water supplied as well as wastewater to the community. And I took on that challenge and that battle, and actually went up against, this was, again, in a Democrat-controlled legislature. And ended up, being moderately successful, very successful until the Speaker of the House, Tom Murphy, stepped in and cut my legs out from under me. But I fought really hard on that issue, and I think that was a defining, kind of a distinctive moment in my time. But also, one of the things that I campaigned on was the ESPLOS, the Educational Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax, and I was successful in getting that passed as well. And again, that was one of those issues that you had to work across party lines. There were really difficult challenges that I had to face, and it was early in my career. But but you never go wrong doing right. So if your focus is always to that have that moral high ground when you're articulating a piece of legislation that needs to be passed, then oftentimes you can be successful. So that was one. I was, again, on the water issues, water rights, riparian rights that we have. I really championed a lot of those causes as well. Intermittent streams that was very controversial at the time, but I never shied away from a fight. If I felt like that there was, we had the moral high ground, and I think that was somewhat of a defining. Those were defining moments for sure.
When you step away, Hans, you got anything you want to jump in? Because I know where my next question is.
The transition?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So what was the moment when you decided to make that leap to running for lieutenant governor?
Great question.
And what was wrong with you?
Yeah, what was I thinking? Yeah, I lost my mind for a short period of time. It was actually in 2005, and I had made a commitment, number one, to term limit myself in the state Senate for 12 years. Okay. And I just believe that, that for me, that was the right thing. For others, obviously it's not. But I had already made the determination I was going to exit the Senate. And I had some people say, you need to consider running for lieutenant governor. At the time, Mark Taylor was going to be exiting to run for governor, and it was an open seat. I had a guy that actually, back early in my Senate career, and this is a fascinating little story, that said, Casey, if you ever run for office, statewide office, and you will, he said, you need to have $250,000 in the bank and be willing to completely put it at risk and not miss it. And I'd never forgotten that. And so in 2005, I actually was considering this, and through the really kind of making sure that everything was right, that one, I was prepared, ready, but that the door was going to open. I kind of fleeced things out, remembering that $250,000 I needed to be able to put at risk and not miss it. And so I had, at the time, was in real estate. I had a fair amount of real estate holdings. So I put all of those holdings on the market, and knowing that if I could sell them, I was going to have enough capital to be able to do what I felt like I was being called to do. I had a contract on all of the property that I owned in less than 7 days, closed it in less than 30 days. And I was like, okay.
So now you have to.
I think that's a pretty good sign that this is what I need to do. And everything was lining up. But when that lined up, it was clear that this was the direction I needed to go in. What is really interesting as a lifelong lesson here to think through, that was in 2005. I liquidated all of my real estate holdings in 2005. I liquidated my bank holdings in 2006. What happens in 2007? Okay. Now, I didn't see what was coming, but it's just interesting how things kind of fall into place like it needs to. And, for me, a believer, I believe that God is ultimately the one that controls our path, and I'm very grateful for that. And it was very memorable.
And for our listeners who don't know this, and especially our younger listeners, Georgia didn't used to always be as red as it is today.
No,
I believe you were actually, the context of your deciding to run for lieutenant governor is that Georgia had never had a Republican lieutenant governor in the history of the state.
Yeah, it's pretty nice to be first. And
Sure.
I was the first Republican state senator out of Hall County and Forsyth the first Republican lieutenant governor in the history of Georgia. And so you're right. I was there through, ushering in the change to get Georgia to a Republican state, was there when Sonny Perdue obviously won. And interestingly enough, we never won outright the majority in either the House or the Senate. It took switchers. It took people that moved from being a Democrat to become a Republican, and that's how we ended up gaining the majority. But those were, remarkable times, and but learning times too, right? I mean, Republicans love the minority because you get to throw bombs from the sideline. All right, when you're in
nothing more fun than being 180 to 10.
Yeah, exactly. but when you are when you're the majority, you got to pull the wagon, which means you have to govern, and everyone has to come together in a way that builds consensus. And by nature, I'm kind of that consensus builder. So it's natural. It's not, in vogue right now to talk about consensus, among among the elected environment. But that's how you get things done. And it is important to always move the country forward to impact people's lives in a very positive way. And that's where my focus has been. Yeah.
Before we leave that topic in specific, as we see Georgia's population grow, and there's no disputing that it's going back to looking a little more 50-50,
sure,
Republican, Democrat, and I think that there are legislators, or especially around the metro area, that are going to decide whether they're Republicans or whether they're Democrats, especially as you get closer to the perimeter. What do you think you'll see it again? You think that you'll see the people that the fence riders, the marginally right or the marginally left, play to hold serve and continue? Yeah,
it's this is, I think, a fascinating discussion. I mean, you look at both what's happening nationally, and then you look at what's happening locally as well. I think at the national level, things have become very polarized. I mean, you're, either for Trump or you're against it. There's nothing in between. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out over the course of the next decade. I mean, with me having 24 years, I've seen the ebb and flow of the political environment quite a bit. But one thing that I have witnessed throughout those 24 years that remains consistent is that people, oftentimes in the political discord, you fall victim of thinking about, really a lateral ball movement. Okay, who can move the ball furthest to the left or to the right? And so what we need and what leaders are called upon to do is, how do we move the ball forward? All right, and that is consistent. People still want a statesman, and I think that oftentimes we have political, discourse or an ideology, approach that might be viewed differently. But if people see a good leader, they tend to gravitate towards that. And leadership is found when it is defined as a statesman, a person who puts the state's interest ahead of themselves. And so I think as long as you Republicans put forth that type of candidate, you're going to have great success. But as we witnessed even in this congressional district, it's a very marginal congressional district, and a lot depends on what the national news is talking about at the time. And so it can sway or persuade others to maybe not go where they are predisposed to be. So, good candidates can transcend any party, I think.
I've heard a state senator whose vast majority of district is Roswell say, I can spend $400,000 in my next state senate race, do everything right, and still lose.
Yeah.
Through something that is of no fault of my own, right, wrong, or indifferent. I think that's really scary and also telling to the average person who will associate a lowly city council member or a state house rep with what goes on in Washington.
Yeah,
because they are not the same.
Yeah. I mean, the fallout and the residual, good, bad, or indifferent, is there. And I mean, listen, let's be honest. I was victim of that, right? I mean,
we'll get there.
so I mean, I know the power and the weight of of the president and the influence that he carries, for sure.
Well, before we get there, I want to maybe push back a little bit,
sure,
and or maybe some clarification.
Sure.
So I know we were talking about what the voters are looking for in the context of the state assembly swinging back and forth a little bit. I don't know that I see the voters generally looking for us. I would love for that to be the case.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to believe you on that.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you look at the 2018 midterms and certainly the presidential in 2016, I don't know that the voters are really looking for a statesman anymore. It seems like they're looking for...
And what I was saying in that context is that I do think that you are right in your assessment that is not the political environment that we're in today. But it is the political environment that will come back. Okay. And I've seen that ebb and flow. I mean, we all remember the Tea Party, right? And how prevalent that was. Okay. Well, no one's really talking about the Tea Party anymore.
I heard Johnny Isaacson talk about how exciting it was to have that at his back, almost 10 years ago. So
there's a lot. I mean, I've lived through a lot of those. I mean, I think the Christian Coalition, I mean, there were influencers in the process that may not be as dominant today. So this, what I'm saying is that this particular era, there will never be another Donald Trump. I mean, this is the Donald Trump era, but it will pass. And when it does pass, I think that what people ultimately are going to be looking for is a statesman. Yeah.
Can the Republican Party in Georgia make those adjustments on its own, or is it going to take losing elections in order to make that adjustment?
Typically, it takes losing. Yeah, I mean, every election has consequences, and we've seen that bear out over history as well. And in this, are there corrections that could be made under normal circumstances? Yes, but we're not in a normal environment. I mean, when you've got a great person like Megan Hansen, for instance, I mean, a great candidate, a lot of the Senate and House members here in this area ended up losing, have no fault of their own. And they were statesmen. They were everything that I think their community wanted, but the political landscape at the time did not create a path forward because it was a referendum at the top of the ticket, not at the bottom. And so that becomes, I mean, that's a very polarizing and difficult environment to navigate. And so you do have casualties. I think other casualties will occur. And the correction will happen.
There's your transition, Ben.
Yeah. Well, and so talk to me about you spend a significant amount of time in the lieutenant governor's spot. Talk to me a bit about evaluating what running for governor looks like. You'd obviously run statewide, and talk about running statewide, at what that experience is like, because David Belle-Isle will tell you that you have no idea how big Georgia is until you've seen every county.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, Georgia is it's a beautiful place, right? I mean, we're here in Alpharetta today, but most of Georgia is nothing like Alpharetta, right? I mean, I will never forget one of the legislators coming into my office one day, and he said, "I've got a phenomenal economic development deal that I need your help on." And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." And he's from Ocilla, Georgia. And I said, "Well, man, tell me about it. I mean, how many employees? I mean, what do you got going on?" And I said, "Can you reveal, the name of the person?" He said, "I can, but don't you tell anybody. This is the biggest thing that's ever hit Ocilla." I said, "Well, tell me what it is." He said, "It's Publix."
Yeah, but it's the truth.
And the point of the story is, I mean, for Ocilla, Georgia, getting a Publix is a big deal. Sure. Okay, I mean, we here in the metro area view that very differently.
It's an embarrassment of riches.
Yeah. I mean, most communities would die for what Alpharetta has. I mean, it sets the bar so high in every category, and so. But we don't want to forget how how rich and abundant we are in amenities in this community. But with all that being said, I mean the South Georgia is very, very different. I mean the amount of poverty that exists, hospitals that are just barely hanging on to stay in and stay open. I mean we've got certain communities that literally have either one or no general practitioner.
Or it'd be
I mean,
pediatrician.
just the family doctor.
Sure.
Okay, I mean, we've got one, maybe zero. I mean, so it's very, very different, and so it's not that the message is different, but I guess they see the world in their perspective that would be viewed differently. So but what I will say is that Georgia is one state. I think a lot of people want to categorize us as saying, well, you have two Georgias, right? Those that have and those that have not. But that's not accurate. And the reason I say that is what would Atlanta be without Hartsville-Jackson Airport? Okay, I mean, this is a huge.
It'd be Birmingham.
It would be, it would be Birmingham. Literally, I mean, if we did not have, where would Georgia be without the port of Savannah? Okay, I mean, this is a $40-60 billion economic engine for the state and the Southeast. I mean, this is a major indicator for us, or engine for us. So we are all one, but the challenges that rural Georgia faces versus metro is very, very different. And so you have to balance all that when you're running statewide office. I mean, that, the things that are important oftentimes in rural Georgia is that basic access to health care, okay? Whereas we don't feel that in metro. And so, the needs are very different. Rural broadband, I mean, we take it for granted in metro, but literally for many families in rural Georgia, they have to go to get in their car and go to a McDonald's in order to have, reliable Wi-Fi. I mean, we don't think about that, where we are. Ag's still the number one industry. But again, it is about the rising tide and making sure that all of our economic engines are hitting on full cylinder. So we do create the rising tide where everybody benefits from. And, that was a big message with me as lieutenant governor and my bid for governor. One of the big initiatives that I had was the College and Career Academy Network that we started from zero and built it now to over 37 of those college and career academies, and where they're located in these rural communities are their economic engines. I mean, companies are literally coming and locating because they see the future employment pipeline that they're going to need in order to be successful in their community. And it's been a huge success, not only for industry and for communities, but individuals as well, because now, they're coming out making $30, $40, $50, $60,000 a year salary with no college debt, but college credits already under their belt. So it's a great success story. But, back to the campaign, I mean, it's a lot of long hours. And a lot, as I commonly refer to, there's a lot of goat roping contests that you have to be a part of. So anyway, but great fun and beautiful people. We are so blessed as a state and so rich in so many ways.
Talk to me about when you get in and you're like, I don't care if you're running for coroner.
Yeah.
There's an element of yourself when you sign up, and Hans's run for city council many moons ago. I was fortunate or unfortunate enough to get elected here.
And fortunate to win. That's a big difference between me and I.
Absolutely.
And you look at it, and I had the wherewithal to know the people in this community and the people that choose to be involved are very, very good people. And if you ran a really nasty race in Alpharetta, you would lose.
Sure.
I think you probably agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
That is not what it is like when you get to a lieutenant governor, U.S. House.
Oh, yeah.
And there's more out there. But my wife was petrified of me putting my name on the ballot just to what it would do to our family.
Sure.
And you look at that and you probably snicker a little bit.
No.
But talk to me about what all goes into that decision making for you and your family to sit there and be like, I'm running for lieutenant governor, I'm running for governor. What are those conversations like? How on earth, how do you make it all work as a guy who's got kids that are growing up, because they were young. They were not all out of the house.
No, by no means. No. I think that one, family has to come first, and that's been, the focus of Nita, my wife, and I, throughout this entire journey. And I think to some degree for me, it was a little different because all three of my boys, they really have only seen me in elected office, right? I mean, they were very, very young when I first ran for the state senate. So they grew up, in a kind of a political family and understanding that there were going to be a lot of people at school that were going to say bad things about their dad, and they had to learn to deal with that. So I think that it was a little bit, sculptured in their DNA as they were growing up, so it made it a little bit easier. But campaigns, the higher you go, the higher the stakes, right? And the more publicized it's going to be. I'll never forget, the first time I ran for lieutenant governor, we spent, I don't know, $3-4 million on TV. And so
how on earth do you raise that kind of money?
Separate podcast. For
that. It's a separate podcast on how do you raise that kind of money. But we and all of a sudden, I would walk into just, a grocery store or walk in, to any, just convenience store, and people would recognize me, right? And so, and so you had to get accustomed to that. And of course, the boys, it was the same way. So, but it also gets very nasty. And that $4 million that we spend are not all on positive ads, and that's somewhat troublesome. That it's campaigns today have become, to tear someone else down in an effort to make yourself look better. And less is being spent on TV and more is being spent on social media and other media outlets to where that message can get out. And, oftentimes anybody that thinks they have a computer believes that, they're a journalist.
Yep.
And people believe this stuff. So, you have to be, campaigns are very, very sophisticated now, from analytics and being able to manage and look at everything that's going on. So very different from when I first ran in 2006, which was dominated by the airwaves.
So unfortunately, I don't think it's getting any better either.
Yeah.
I remember reading an article after the 2016 elections about how the next big phenomena was going to be doctored videos where designers could
Casey Cagle hates Americans.
Well, it was even worse than that, where they talked about the possibility of putting the faces of candidates on porn videos and some really outlandish stuff. And I was hoping we were further away than it appears we may really have been, because we just saw in the news recently the Dr. Nancy Pelosi video.
Yeah.
And I think we're there. I think 2020 is going to be ugly before we figure this thing out.
Yeah. And again, we have kind of truth in advertising, right? But in these other venues that people are gain and garner their information, there's really not a lot of integrity. Not to be despairing to my host here today, but I remember when I first came into the legislature in 1994. When you were being interviewed, the first thing that was asked is, what's your source? Okay. They had to have a verifiable source that would go on the record before they would actually do the story. Today, that's not the case.
Lots of unnamed sources out there.
There's a lot of unnamed sources. I heard this, I heard that. What can you share with me? It is a very, very different, environment from the media perspective. And you look at the president with Twitter. This is and fake news and all the other buzzwords that you hear out there. So, what does that look like in the next, 5 to 10 years? It gets kind of scary. And honestly, I think you're right. I think the doctoring of information as well as videos and things of this nature is going to be very concerning.
So tell me, we get to right at a year, I would guess the first round of the Republican general happened in the last couple weeks a year ago. Mm-hmm. And you finish at the top of that by, I won't say a wide margin, but it was healthy enough. Mm-hmm. How are you feeling when you get up on Wednesday, and what are your action items for a day like that, coming off where it's virtually impossible to get that 50+1
sure.
with that many people on the ballot? How do you feel that morning? What do you do? Do you immediately go back to the well and start fundraising? What's your life like when you get to be governor runoff candidate, Cagle?
It's very different, right? I mean, so you're always setting certain expectations for yourself, but also, for your supporters. And, I think that there were those that you had come to the realization that, hey, he's literally going to win this thing without a runoff. And in their mind, I think they were right. They weren't looking at the polling that we were. So I think, you always have, where you have to step back and really analyze where did we think we were going to end up? Where did we end up? And
how were those compared to each other?
Actually, they were pretty spot on. Yeah. We felt like that we were going to be, right in that range. But, so yeah, I mean, you just get back up the next day and you go back to the fundamentals, which is, making sure that you're touching all the people that you need to touch and raising the money in which assists and helps you do that. We did a lot of kind of, conference calls with the different, support base that we have, whether it's local elected officials and others. And so we went right back and kind of began setting expectations and putting what the new strategy is. I mean, when you go into a runoff, that's a whole new campaign. So you literally have to come up with a new strategy, because now you're no longer fighting, a field of 8 or whatever the number is. You're just fighting one. And so now it becomes singular and focused. So it's a different strategy. And so, day one after the primary was to go back to the team, put the strategy together, be clear about it, what our expectations are, and communicate that appropriately to our supporters.
So at some point over the next couple of weeks, somebody who didn't make the runoff decides that they wanted to come into your office and talk to you. And they will remain nameless because they're not elected, and I'm not going to be held liable for slander. Right. How does something like that, are you ever prepared for that moment? Did you see it coming with the recording? Did you have any idea that was out there before it happened?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. I mean, listen, the one thing that I tell people to this day is, there's a reason that you drive your car through the windshield and not the rearview mirror. Okay. You don't look at the past, you look forward, and devastation, disappointment always is going to come our way.
Sure.
And when it does, you have to deal with it. You have to accept it. And ultimately, you have to turn the page and start writing what that new chapter of life is going to look like. And people are going to disappoint you, even when they look you in the eye and say, I want to have a man-to-man confidential conversation with you. And their motive is not what they're saying. It's coming out of their mouth. And that's, that's hurtful. But again, can you forgive and forget? It's hard, it's hard. But again, I think in life as a whole, we are by nature, I think, forgiving people. We want to see the best in others. But they're going to let you down. And, I don't want to see that particular individual in a dark alley at night, where it's just he and I. But
is that because he's a Navy SEAL, or because you don't want to see him?
No, it's definitely not because he's a Navy SEAL. But but again, you've got to you got to move forward, and we have, and that's that. Again, that was a very unfortunate situation, and again, going back to. When you release little bits and pieces of things, you can make someone, sound and look very different than who they are. And, but that's all water under the bridge.
So I would say, I would say it this way, as you move a little bit further down that path, I think that you have made it when the President of the United States decides to weigh in on your race, because
one way or another,
one way or another, as you go and you really recover from that moment that got put out there, and you feel like things are, the ship has righted itself considerably. You're putting one foot in front of the other. Sure. Momentum is regained.
Yeah.
How on earth did you ever get to a place where the President of the United States was like, I'm weighing in on this one? and did you have any idea that was coming?
No. I remember specifically, I was in Lumpkin County, Dahlonega, Georgia, campaigning with veterans that day. And I'm giving a speech, and it's a room full of veterans and all our supporters, a big, kind of a big rally. And my staff just, interestingly enough, was running around in the back, and it was like strange. And I almost stopped to say, guys, can you all, just sit down while I make my speech? But I didn't. And afterwards, my campaign manager came up to me and he says, I need to see you right now. And so I followed him back into a private room, and we stood there, and he says, the President of the United States just endorsed your opponent. And I was like, yeah, what else have you got? And he said, no, I'm dead serious. And so, immediately you're in total shock, right?
Oh, sure.
What happened here? What's going wrong? I mean, I've been a friend of the president. I mean, how could he do this to me? I mean, there's a lot of emotions that you go through. But you ask why, and
that's what I'm going to ask you. Why did he do that? Do you know today?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was, listen, do I know Ironclad? I've not had a conversation with him, okay? So I can't specifically tell you that I've talked with Donald Trump and this is what he said. Although he did say publicly that it was Sonny Perdue who, engaged him to endorse my opponent. And I do believe that to be the case. It's disappointing. Of course, I was a lieutenant governor while Sonny was governor, and was a very, we had a very good run and a good partnership during those times.
He's a well-liked guy in the state, even still.
Yeah. So, a lot of reasons behind that. I think when Nathan Deal, Governor Deal, decided to endorse me, I think that upset Sonny Perdue at the time, and so that's when he decided to try to throw a Trump card out. No pun intended.
So you say that's not ironclad. Are you suggesting there may be an alternative theory?
I don't have one. You're
just leaving that margin for error.
I just say ironclad in that I have not, spoken specifically to Donald Trump other than what he has said. So I have not been an eyewitness, but I believe that to be the case.
Well, tell me this, as you move on, at what point in that process, because in 100% disclosure, Eamon Keegan and I raised money for you through a PAC, and we thought we did great. So I'm not going to take. I'm not taking the blame. I'm not taking the blame for this. At what point did you realize that the ship was not going to be coming home on a victory voyage? Was it before that Tuesday?
Yeah, we knew before the Tuesday. I mean, when Donald Trump the President of the United States decides to endorse, it's gonna be significant, but you don't really know how to measure that. So we immediately went into the field, with polling, and kind of surveyed Georgia to get an indication. And at that point, we literally were tracking every day. So we had an idea. And every night or every morning that I woke up and looked at those numbers, I mean, we were dropping like like a lead balloon, as we say in the South. It was not pretty. And so we knew Tuesday was not gonna be good, but I'm a competitive guy and I work hard, and you try to do the best that you can, and you try to find a way to navigate. And we were hopeful that there was going to be this, and we were trying to have a strategy to really get the people in the middle to come out, but the environment was just too polarizing, and so it just didn't occur. But again, listen, I mean, I can literally sit here with you today and say that I am completely at peace.
Sure.
I obviously wanted it, but I wanted it for the right reasons. I had a life outside of politics, and I have a life now outside of politics, and I am loving it. And after the campaign, I remember specifically taking the family down to the beach. We're sitting there with my boys around the pool, and one of them said, "Dad, I'm glad you lost." And I still hadn't quite got to the place that I am today. And I was a little raw. I was like, "What are you talking about? You're glad I'm lost?" Yeah, I'm a little agitated this time. And I said, "No, we're glad you lost." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "We finally have our dad back." And
yeah, man,
when he said that, I mean, all of a sudden it became crystal clear. And for me, it's bare to be completely true, because the time that I have had with my boys, the time that I have had with my daughter-in-laws, with my grandbabies and my wife, I mean, it's been priceless. It truly has. And I've gotten to do things that I never would have been able to as governor. And again, I started out in this podcast talking about what got me into politics, okay? And if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be, and you just have to accept it. And what is meant to be is going to be far better than any of us could imagine. And I am here to testify to you that it is far better than I could have ever imagined. And, I'm just thankful to the good Lord above that, he's directed my path in the way it's been. And, listen, Governor Kemp and I have a good relationship. I text with him, probably, back at the convention, so that would have been a week or so ago, and he's doing well, and we're both in a good place. So, and I wish him the very best.
Well, tell us a little bit on the other side of politics. What are you doing today? What does well-known Georgian former Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle find himself doing Monday through Friday?
Oh, well, so one, as I said, I'm getting to spend a lot more time with my wife. I've gotten a little bit lazier because I get up in the morning and have my coffee and read my paper and kind of get about my day a little slower pace than I was, which has been very nice.
And don't immediately look for your name.
Yeah. No. It's not anything like that. It's not looking at all the events that are stacked in front of you, and so the pace has been very welcoming. But really, professionally, what I've done is I've started an opportunity fund. And to give the listeners a little bit of perspective on this, during 2007, during the Tax and Jobs Act, a great incentive was put in place for federally qualified opportunity zones to really attract and incentivize the private sector to take their capital gain and deploy those in these underserved areas through innovation of business and real estate. And so I created a fund that does just that. And by virtue of an individual doing so, they get three benefits. One is if they invest in a fund that invests into these opportunity zones, they get to defer their capital gain for 7 years, 5 to 7 years. And upon the 7 year, they get a 15% reduction or a step up in basis, which ultimately results in a reduction of 15%. And then at the 10-year timeline, all of their appreciated value in the asset over and above their basis becomes tax-free. And so if a person exits a stock, an Apple stock that they bought, let's say for $300,000, they exit it for $1.3 million, they have $1 million gain, then they can either pay the government $238,000 roughly, or they can hold that $238,000 interest-free for 7 years, invest it in my fund, put it to work, and then at the 10-year timeline, they're going to be able to take out whatever the appreciated value in that. It's a phenomenal. It is undeniably the best investment of our lifetime. It is an opportunity like I've never seen. And we did one down in Tampa called Heights Union. It's a $95 million mixed-use development, and it's doing really, really well. We've got about $200 million in the pipeline, and I'm having the time of my life because, again, I'm getting to see great value add into communities, and it's not just simply a win for the company, but it's a win for the investors. It's a win for the community as a whole, because now they're seeing real, this rising tide, and that's what my firm's name is, Rising Tide Opportunity Fund. They're seeing a rising tide that's lifting all boats, and so it's a meaningful exercise that I have found very, very rewarding.
How big is the footprint of projects you're identifying?
Southeast, yeah. Okay. So it's mostly in the Southeast. The actual federally qualified opportunity zones are a national program, 8,700 of those that exist. None in Alpharetta, I might add. but it's, Marietta. We've got a deal that we're looking at right now in Marietta. I mean, some great communities that have it. Certainly Augusta, Savannah, Macon, Columbus, Gainesville, where I'm from, areas like that. And Florida has a lot, particularly from the devastation. We looked at a deal actually in Panama City that we ended up passing on. But they're great, just great areas to invest in, and they need that influx of capital to really jumpstart their community in terms of, economic prosperity.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate you coming by via Black Box Ben Burnett co-podcasted special. It's really interesting to sit down and talk to somebody that has done what you've done and seen what you've seen, and have them not really hold back.
It's been a fun ride. I have literally, no regrets. And I think that, most people probably can't say that, and maybe it's because I, forgive and forget pretty quick, but it's been an amazing journey to think about where I came from, from a single mom living in a little trailer, being able to, be the number 2 guy in the state, and, experience the things that I've experienced, and see, this state, be the number 1 state for 6 years in a row, and those college and career academies, charter systems. I mean, the list goes on. And it's been very, very rewarding, and it was a beautiful chapter. And now I'm getting to write a new chapter, so it's great.
My last question will be this: is there ever any chance we see your name on the ballot again?
Not in Alpharetta, I can tell you that. No.
You want to come at me for my city council seat?
Oh, no.
I would pay money to see that.
Everybody says never say never, in politics. But, I really am on the new chapter. I really am. And this is an area where it's still, I'm no longer on the not-for-profit side. I'm fully on the profit side, but there is a residual benefit that's coming to the community and the state as a whole. And, I'm still involved from a public service component, doing things.
You always will be.
And always will be. I mean, I was in Athens, for a charity event. I mean, there's a lot that I'll continue to do and will be very active in service, but it would take an awful lot to get my name back on a ballot, I can tell you. Even in Alpharetta, that was a joke, but yeah.
Well, Lieutenant Governor Cagle, we greatly appreciate your time today. Thanks for coming to just talk to us, share your experience. It's not every day you get to talk to somebody who has done that. We really try to keep things local, but every once in a while you get these guys that are just willing to come in here and chop it up and tell stories about what the big kids do on the other side of the playground.
Well, I wouldn't say that. Just remember, everybody puts their pants on the same way, right? So, well, Ben, it's great to be with you, Hans. Thank you. You got a great studio here, and I know that your success will continue to rise. And anytime I can be back with you guys, I count it a true honor. Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Good stuff.